Jane Jacobs was a consummate observer, and her economic theories about urban dynamics and economic development are derived from those observations. She came to believe that the principles that apply to ecosystems likewise apply to economies, namely those describing development, expansion, and dynamic stability. Here I'll walk through a series of her theoretical propositions and their consequences for economic development. Increasing division of labor is the driving force of economic growth, and people engage in this growth work naturally when there is accommodation for such activity. More specifically, growth comes from building incrementally on top of existing work called parent work. The Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing Company, founded in 1902, now known as 3M, started making sand for manufacturers of metal castings. Then they put their sand on paper to provide sandpaper for carpenters. Experimentation with adhesives to improve sandpaper led to masking tape, cellulose tape, scotch tape, and onto Post-it notes. Sand also was coated for polishing, and in another link-to-link chain, sand eventually became the base of paving materials. 3M today produces around 60,000 different products. When new work is added to old, it's not added to the whole of the other work, but to one task in the division of labor. Sandpaper was added to the sand sorting process, not the sand digging process. Making tape arose from the making adhesive tasks of making sandpaper. Beginning to make sandpaper also increases the division of labor tasks. Thus, we can say D plus A equals ND, where D is a division of labor task, A is something that we've added to it, and we create the opportunity for multiple division of labor tasks. This looks something like division of labor tasks has something added to it, which produces multiple tasks. One of those can have something added to it, which produces other tasks, and the process continues. In the first case, n equals 3, then n equals 2, and n equals 4. What gets added next is unpredictable, intuitive, almost as if workers glean messages from the parent work. These messages appear to fall into two types of suggestions: messages from the materials themselves about potential further uses, and messages arising from particular problems encountered in the course of performing work. Remember Andy Grove's observations that innovation in computer chips were often happy accidents arising through the activity of producing said chips. And the logic of the development process is supplied by the person adding the work in the moment, not by responding to an external demand. Imitation, or economic borrowing, is a shortcut to innovation for adding work. Repairing objects made through the division of labor provide opportunities for producing repair parts. Then the production is added onto the work of repair, but can eventually lead to the ability to produce the entire item oneself. Henry Ford failed his first 2 times trying to start an automobile manufacturing company. And the first 2 times, he tried to implement the entire process from start to finish. The 3rd time, he used parts from contractors and assembled the cars, then gradually started producing component by component until his Rouge River plant could produce all the Model T components at the same plant. In order for the development process to happen, workers need the agency to respond to those messages. Captive division of labor, where there is no opportunity to innovate, impedes the development of new work from parent work. This was one of the reasons workers so hated Taylorism, which prioritized efficiency and left no room for individual agency. It also suggests the CIO's original activism toward giving workers control over production processes was based on a deep economic reality. To clarify, the division of labor in itself creates nothing. Division of labor describes a way of organizing work that has already been created. Task subdivision increases the intensity of production, but it isn't new work. The innovation or imitation process of adding work is an extensive increase, which could then be further subdivided. Thus, there are 2 ways to increase division of labor tasks: by further subdividing existing work, or by adding new work that comes with new tasks to be subdivided. Sector, industry, and occupational designations are useful for some types of economics analysis, but they interfere with our understanding of the process of add-on work taking place anywhere in the economy. Sector names and industry and occupation categories carry little information about the division of labor processes which drive innovation. So those taxonomies used in the Leontief categories do not describe the actual innovation activity. Furthermore, innovations cross sectors, industries, and occupations. Jacobs directed her attention towards cities, which were centers of innovation, but not all cities were alike in this regard. Manchester, UK in the mid-1900s was well known for large, highly efficient textile mills employing production methods that differed materially from production methods of old. Karl Marx's worldview concerning labor and capital were informed by his experiences of Manchester at this time. Manchester was textiles, and the city was heralded as an exemplar city of the future. Birmingham, on the other hand, received no such accolades. It was very much a muddle and not at all modern in the efficient production sense. It had a few large industries, but most of the productive work was performed by smaller shops with around 12 workers. Many of these shops did work for other shops, and many of the shops produced the same sorts of goods. Breakaways, where workers would leave a concern to start their own, were commonplace, and it was difficult to pin down just what it was that Birmingham produced, unlike Manchester, which obviously made textiles. Yet, by 1970, only 2 cities in the UK were economically thriving, London and Birmingham. Manchester did indeed become the city of the future in terms of unemployment and economic stagnation. Innovation arises out of a highly inefficient process of trial and error. We could rework our division of labor formulation above as D plus a certain amount of TE, trial and error, plus the add-on gives you additional division of labor tasks. MTE is an unpredictable amount of trial and error. Inefficiency is baked into the innovation process, and efficiency is the enemy of innovation. Jacobs proposed a measure of an economy's development rate based on the number of new goods and services developed in a given period of time. This could be written as the ratio of new goods and services at time t plus 1 that weren't available at time t to all the goods and services available at time t. Implementing this measure isn't as straightforward as it might seem because the number of different goods and services isn't recorded. Rather, agencies track employment in defined industries and occupations. Jacobs also explained in detail 2 specific development processes: import replacement, also known as import substitution, and export generation. We'll start with import substitution. At first, the local economy consists of consumer and producer goods and services. The producer goods are intermediate goods. Some producer goods and services feed exports. Exports buy imports, which are used in consumer, producer, and export goods and services. In the second step, the local economy starts producing goods and services that had previously been imported. Thus, imports decrease and consumer and producer production increases. In the third phase, the economy is still earning the same amount of imports, but they import different goods and services than before. SI are shifted imports. And finally, a proportion of the new imports can be used to increase the goods and services offered locally, serving as new parent work. IM is the import replacing multiplier effect. Total imports and exports don't change, but the composition of imports changes and the local economy grows. Now to explain export generation. Starting again with our economy consisting of consumer and producer goods, imports, and exports. Some local producers start to export their goods and services instead of selling them to local consumers, which increases exports. These increased exports can purchase more imports, which increase the quantity and diversity of imported goods coming into the economy. Finally, EM is the export multiplier effect. Because of the increase in diversity of imports, it is more likely that producers will become exporters. Thus, there is a consistent growth in volume and variety of goods and services. Finally, Jacobs was of the view that static rural entities derived from urban entities, which today still runs contrary to conventional development wisdom. Cities likely did not have agricultural roots and could just as well have begun as trading centers or depots. Jacobs' definition of a city is any locale with an active growth dynamic. Thus, persistently rural communities by definition are missing this growth dynamic, and rural work is transplanted city work, including agriculture itself. This led to warning about mistaking the results of economic development for the preconditions of economic development. I'll end this segment with a Jacobs quote. "Nature is prodigious with details, but parsimonious with principles."